All right. Hi, I'm Sarithkin. I'm from Ontier, and I'm here tonight with my sister Aishaksi, who is a Laurel in Ontier, and with Duke Fleig, who's a Laurel and a Pelican and a Master, and a Duke. And this is part of my 50 interviews with a Duke series to finish my quest I started this year to fight 50 Dukes, but since that's not going to happen with the pandemic, I am interviewing them instead. And it's kind of cool because last night we interviewed Steingrim, and tonight we get to interview Fleig, who is a founder, right? You were at the founding tournament?
I was at the first tournament, yes.
Can you tell us about the first tournament?
Okay, let me clear up a few things.
Okay.
One, it was not a birthday party for Diana Paxson.
Okay.
It was a tournament. It was intended to be a tournament. It was a good party also, but it was intended to be a tournament. And I lived down in LA at the time and heard about it through science fiction fandom, which in the very beginnings was a large part of our base of participants. They published an announcement about it in a amateur press association weekly, where we would type up things, run off 50 copies on a mimeograph or a ditto machine, and staple them together, and everybody would take home a volume and then comment the next time. It was a primitive form of blog, including comment sections. And there was this announcement, come, there'll be this grand tournament for the Dismay. And as it happened, a friend of mine was driving up to San Francisco to go see, I think it was Pirates of Penzance at the Lamplighters in San Francisco. So I said, hey, that's cool. Can I hitch a ride? And I'll take the bus home because I want to go to this thing in Berkeley. He was agreeable. And so he dropped me off in Berkeley near the house. And I went and I looked in the backyard and there wasn't anybody there. And so I decided that I would walk around the block and look at Berkeley, and then I would come back and see if there's anybody there before I started, doing doorbells and stuff, because I am actually quite shy. And 20 minutes later, I looked in the back, and there was all sorts of people back there. So Society Time dates from the very first tournament.
Nice.
And so I hung out, and I actually got a chance to fight. I broke one of the last swords that they had that were made of lath. And we had to put on the fencing mask to protect our heads. And I had made in advance, because this announcement of this showed up like a month before the event, I had made a banner for myself. And it hung up on the clothesline above the fighting field. And there were all sorts of good things. And you can see video of a lot of this on the West Kingdom History site and in other places. The biggest thing for me was, one, the fighting, and two, the impromptu research experiment that took place. Siegfried von Heftigkeit, Dave Thulis, had made, well before the tournament, had made a shield using the method shown in the Book of Battles. You start with the wood, you then cover it with leather, then you paint it. And the question was, would this stand up to a crossbow? And as it happened, Master Beverly Hodgehead had a crossbow at home, which he quickly went home and brought back with one quarrel. It was a 50-pound crossbow. Ooh. And the quarrel had a hunting arrowhead on it. Well, we put the shield up against the side of the house, and everybody backed up behind Beverly. And he strung the crossbow, and he put the quarrel in the crossbow, and he aimed at the shield, and there was a twang, crack. And we couldn't find the crossbow, the bolt, anywhere. There was no crossbow bolt to be found. We looked under the house, but we'd heard the crack, so we knew it had hit something. And eventually they found the arrowhead, which was curled up into a spiral. And then we found some fragments of sawdust or splinters because the bolt had shattered on impact and there was a dent in the shield.
Oh, wow.
Now, it was a little tiny dent. So everybody said, ooh, that was fun. And about that time, I unfortunately had to leave because I had to get down to downtown Oakland, catch the bus to go back to Pasadena so that I could, no, go away. I don't want to restart the device. Because I was a student at Caltech at the time. So I missed the whole parading down Telegraph Avenue and getting the rotisserie chicken at the supermarket and bringing it back and sitting around the fire. But that was what it was. And it was interesting. I thought, wow, it's kind of nice. And as it happened, we kept hearing about things happening because, well, fans were writing inserts for this amateur press thing. And so I heard about the March Crown Tourney the next year. That was 66, this was 67. So I came up for that. By that time, I had made myself a shield. We had graduated from lath to EMT conduit for swords, which you sort of flattened out. So instead of being round like this, it was sort of oval with flat sides so that it would have an edge. And found the place and took part in that. The memorable thing about that was the assassination attempt on the king by, what was his name? His Monday name was Jerry Jacks. He accidentally spilled the soup right behind where the king was sitting. So it was decided that was an assassination attempt and he was killed. The really great thing was the person who came on the field and proclaimed himself to be Aragorn, son of Arathorn. The pile of gauntlets at his feet grew with amazing rapidity since he was obviously pretending to be a famous person. And I got the honor of being the third person to fight him, which I took my big old shield, which is about 4.5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, knocked him over, pushed the shield up so it was holding his face down, started sawing across his gut. There was a lot of stuff about the first few tournaments that we have thankfully gotten rid of because it would be really dangerous now. Then we didn't know what we were doing. So in fact, we were aware that what we were doing was hitting our friends with sticks, and it was dangerous. So we kept trying to not actually hurt people except if they claimed to be Aragorn. And that's how it got started. And then I moved to the Bay Area just after BayCon in '68. And Baycon was when the SCA held a big demo. People like Paul Anderson, Jerry Pornell, um, I think Larry Niven also fought, Harlan Ellison fought. Um, and the fans took, hey, there's this new thing in town. And the next thing we knew, there were people claiming to be SCA in New York City and environs, and Chicago and environs. And that was sort of like the hyperinflationary uh, portion of the SCA growth. You know, before we actually had condensed out all the bosons and leptons and stuff, and it just grew magically. And then, so then I was there in the Bay Area, and I actually started getting really active. Randall Garrett, Randall of Hightower, I was part of his household for a while. He's the one that actually got heralds started in the SCA because he knew some ceremonies. He was a science fiction and fantasy author, and he knew Church of England. So he's the one that put all the bells and whistles into being a herald. For one thing, the first time he opened his mouth at full volume, everybody turned around and said, "What was that?" He was loud. And by then we had kings and queens. Around then we got counts and dukes and duchesses and countesses, of course. Knights had come the first 12th night. You can find that information up on the West Kingdom History site too, which I recommend all sorts of people go and view it because there's a retrospective remembering of a lot of the people who were there for the first tournament, commenting on a document that was put together around AS 11, which listed all the events and what happened at them in a very dry form. And Hirsch von Henford took this, copied it into electrons, and set up an email list for everyone that he could find who had been there in the first years. And there's a lot of good information there, a lot of, I don't remember it that way, which, by the way, anything I'm saying here, fallible memory. Not to mention remembering the best parts rather than necessarily what happened. And from there, let's see, I was 4 years at Berkeley, got my PhD, moved to Iowa, founded the Barony of Dumnonia, which no longer exists. It's part of Shatterdale now. Moved to the east, where I lived on Long Island, which reduced my interaction somewhat because you always had to go through New York City to get off the island. And it was no better then than it is now in terms of speed. And then I moved to Buffalo, helped found the group there. Then I moved back here, and I've been here ever since. So I've rambled a little bit. Go ahead and ask questions.
Oh no, that's great. That was fascinating. When you were out in the East, you won an Eastern Crown, correct?
I won Crown Tournament. It was the only Crown Tournament that I knew I was going to still be in the East a year later. And so I entered that one and won it. And then stepped up with my Lady Nickerlin and was King of the East, and lots of people didn't like it because I did things like saying, okay, coronation is 5 months away from crown tourney in the East Kingdom. They hold the crown tourney almost immediately after coronation. Or at least they did then. I'm not sure what it is now. But I said, I welcome bids for coronation, especially if the people in Atlantia put in a bid, I would give that extra favor. And all the people on the Boswash corridor said, "Wah!" And I said, I live in Buffalo. Shut up.
At that time, were rattan swords a thing, or were you still using?
Oh, we discovered rattan around AS3 or 4.
Oh, okay.
We discovered rattan. It was very good stuff, and it was hard to get. If you lived in the Midwest, it was really hard to get. I tried willow. You know, it's kind of flexible.
Whippy.
Kind of don't put it down in wet ground, otherwise it'll root. And we made swords last as long as we could, because the next batch of rattan was a long way down the road. So where was I? Oh, yeah, I won crown tourney. Reigned. Immediately after I won, there was a crown tournament to pick my successor. I presided over one of the nastiest bits of infighting that I've ever had the pleasure of having to deal with. Have you heard the name Gervasi Haraldson?
No.
Okay. He founded the group known as the Markland Medieval Militia. It was a group that was Viking Age characters. They were very similar to the SCA in some ways. Almost all of them were also in the SCA. He wrote the book on Norse names, the book that we still use. He was a professor of Old Norse in University of Maryland, I believe. And he composed a drapa, a form of Norse poetry, in honor of my coronation. And I said, Gervasi, speak to me. And he spoke, and it was wonderful. And I gave him my cup. I said, drink from my cup. And he did. And about mumble years later, actually mumble hours later, let's get the time unit right, a delegation of my knights approached me and said, how could you do that? I said, how could I do what? They said, he insulted one of your knights. He did? He had given me a copy of the drop. I said, where? Because it was all printed out. Right there. I said, really? Well, and he accused a previous king of oath breaking. So I went up to the previous king and I said, well, I don't think he actually meant this. But if he did you? Well, there was a lot of he said, she said. And I went to Bossi and I said, my knights say that one says that you called Lara Laverty an oathbreaker. Did you really? And he said, looked at me straight in the eye and said, yes, he did. So there was much attempts to gather evidence and stuff. And I finally said, screw it. All of you, it was 3 years ago. Everyone shut up. And then I waited to see who screamed loudest. And the knight in question and his buddies all said, okay, we'll shut up. And Bossi said, I cannot accept that decision. And I said, that's what I thought. Okay. And he took it to the board, which was almost unheard of in those days. But he took it to the board, and there was further investigation and sanctions. And the Society Seneschal at the time said, okay, everybody shut up.
All over a line in a poem. Okay.
So that was, we had a really nice crown tournament, except for the part where one of the people was accused of being a rhino hide and took all his friends and left and founded the Kingdom of Acher.
What were some of your more favorite parts of reigning?
Giving awards to people who deserved them. That was, and was for my other reign also. That is the best part of being king. I was able to knight someone with a knight's hand on the sword. I was able to knight someone who deserved it. I was able to give a pelican to someone who really deserved it and who had been totally overlooked. We got him out of the kitchen finally by sending the herald in after him. He came out dusting off his hands because he'd been making pie crusts.
Uh-oh.
It was great. Let's see. Oh, I started, my wife and I started a tradition in the East Kingdom. It keeps getting lost and then refound and goes on for a while. It's called the Order of the Footed Bowl. And it's given by the person who currently holds it to whoever he thinks set the best table in terms of attractiveness and period style and stuff like that at a feast.
Nice.
And we did it because, well, there wasn't anybody saying we couldn't. We did that after we reigned.
Someone's asking, who did you knight?
Just a second. Name. Fernando Salazar y Perez. The Puma.
So you're a master. What
Yes.
was what is your take on fealty? Like being a master and being king?
I am perfectly willing to swear fealty as king. I have sworn fealty to a fosterling of mine. I have sworn fealty to several queens. I take fealty very seriously. And this was, by the way, one of the reasons why that mess was such an expurgated, deleted mess was I had sworn to the populace to defend them. And that includes against the knights. It's the very round table thing, you know. Why did Arthur set up the round table? Make sure his knights weren't beating up on the peasants. I take it very seriously. When I was offered the baldric back in AS6, before I left the West Kingdom, I had a girlfriend who was my queen. And not understanding as much about fealty as I do now, I said, I cannot be in fealty to two people. Therefore, I will take the baldric. And at that time, it was a viable option.
Do you think it's not a viable option anymore?
If you live in the East, happens all the time. If you live in Ontario, happens moderately frequently. If you live practically anywhere else, including the West, it's exceptionally rare. We did one last July who I gave my old battered, beat up baldric to, and another master and I had done rock, paper, scissors to see who would get to give their baldric to him. there are now 3 masters in the Kingdom of the West. And he's being interviewed on interviewing the knights tonight.
Oh, cool. How has your view of fealty changed over the years? You said that you had a different view when you...
I said I didn't know much about it in terms of the period usage of fealty. Period usage of fealty was, I swear to defend X unless he's fighting Y, in which case I will send 5 men to X and I will fight for Y. Unless the king calls, in which case we'll all go fight for the king. That kind of contract doesn't happen in the SCA. In order to become a knight, I would have to promise to swear at everyone. And I find I can be just as loyal wearing a baldric as I can if I wore a belt and chain. And from time to time, there's a strategic nuclear weapon that I can use. I haven't used it yet because it's a strategic nuclear weapon and you only get to drop it once. If there's a disagreement between the rest of the chivalry and someone who's going to be king, and I think they're being silly asses, and I think the king is honorable and forthright, I can go up there and swear fealty at.
Cool.
We could do it once.
Right. And you've never done it?
Arcoxy?
Sorry.
I've never done it, no. I've sworn privately to... My internet connection is unstable, it says. Bullshit. I mean, sorry.
That's okay. We're good.
You tied up for a little bit, but you're good now.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why it thought the internet was unstable. I have really
Now you're lagging a
great
little bit.
Wi-Fi in the house. Never dropped that bomb. I've sworn privately once to a king, and I've been Queen's champion for several.
I saw that. I was, of course, I went onto the West Kingdom history site because I wanted to, do some background on you.
The oath that you give as Queen's champion is basically a fealty oath. It just doesn't use the F word. And so I've actually sworn fealty to them. I've sworn fealty as an officer to the crown. That one I use my understanding, my now significantly greater understanding of real fealty oaths. When I have a fealty oath to swear as an officer, I swear it in my office, I so swear. So this is not a personal fealty. This is me, the principal herald, swearing fealty to the crown to support it and do my job.
I just think fealty as a concept is something people don't think very deeply on. And I figured you probably had, since, you've made a choice that is not done a lot in the West.
At the time, it was there were actually half a dozen or more but it's always the minority option. And in fact, I'm happy that it is the minority option. There ought to be knights who really have thought about the fealty oath, and they've thought deeply about the fealty oath. And they go forth and they go up there and they swear it, and they mean it. And then my friend Corwin and I, and now lash, stand up in the back of the crowd for court, raise our glasses, say, Your Majesties, we the masters of the West Kingdom, toast you and wish you a long and happy reign.
Cool. So your second.
The current reign has been very long and less than Sorry, try again. Okay, you said something and it got flipped by Zoom.
Yeah, I was just gonna segue into your second reign in the West and how it was different than reigning in the East culturally.
Well, for one thing, I was a Westerner in the West. It was still my favorite part, giving awards. I was able to knight Sir Maven Gervais, and she got to have her lord's hand on the sword as the knight that has to hold the sword as well. That was cool.
That is cool.
March Crown Tournament was one of those awful days where the air is full of little tiny droplets. So it's not actually raining, but the wind is blowing things across. And friends of mine had taken a adage that I had, which was, there are never enough mushrooms.
Mushrooms?
And they've gone, I like mushrooms.
Okay.
I like mushrooms a lot. We had whims. There are never enough mushrooms. There's no such thing as bears. Those large creatures with plantigrade feet, no bursae behind the ears, are properly termed blank. They gifted me with 40 pounds of mushrooms.
Oh. That's a lot of mushrooms.
And a quart of bacon grease. A lot of mushrooms. And you know what? On a day where the temperatures are in the 50s,
Did we lose him again?
and the wind is blowing, and everyone is wet and cold, mushroom soup, hot mushroom soup, is a really good thing. And the household I had for reigning made mushroom soup for the populace.
Nice.
And that was cool. Another cool thing, there were plenty of cool things. It was a short reign because the West has 3 reigns a year, but it was full.
Has that always been the case in the West, 3 reigns a year?
It was more frequent at the very beginning because you reigned between the tournament you won and the next tournament.
Oh.
That stopped, AS 2 or 3. But we've had 3 reigns a year since then, yes. Every once in a while, the king gets an idea that having 6-month reigns would allow him to do more. And all us old timers say, that's one of the reasons why we have 3 reigns a year. My opinion, and I pretty much have followed this opinion, kings should reign in the SCA, not rule. That's why we have the civil service. We have the seneschals and the heralds and the arts ministers and the marshals and all that. It removes our titular head from too much power. Not that some kings haven't tried. But We had an Estrella War that was pretty good that year. I got to clock the King of Atenveld on the head and have it published in the Smithsonian. They were doing an article on us. We had a war where the king of Caid, because by that time Caid was its own kingdom, and I agreed that we had been having way too little fun at the West Caid War. Tempers ran high, blah, blah, blah. So we decided we were just going to have a war, but we were going to make sure it was fun. So we set up, the heralds are going to, the battle is going to be called after a minute. And then the heralds are going to go around and identify the dead based on what they're wearing in the way of arms, and, devices. Well, they called late on, and the heralds started a stopwatch. And battle ended, and the stopwatch finally reached 1 minute. And we looked at each other and said, well, that didn't go well. Let's try again, and let's do it after 30 seconds. And the heralds went out. We told everybody, no, lie where you are. And that was scary. Because, of course, Armand de Sévigné, king of Caid, Frederick of Holland, king of the West, and went on down, because the heralds, of course, ordered it in terms of order of precedence. All the knights came first, and then 5 soldiers wearing the colors of Caid. It was an experiment. It happened. The fighters didn't like it much because they had to stop fighting in the middle of fighting. So we gave them lots and lots of bridge battles because those are fun. And then I stepped down and got my little fancy hat with the strawberry leaves on it.
Very cute.
Awesome.
There's strawberry leaves.
Is that your original?
And this is actually my county coronet with strawberry leaves added to it because I'm a cheapskate. Thrifty, there, thrifty. The original was made by our next door neighbor in Buffalo, who was practicing to become a silversmith, and said, if I sell you this, if you buy this silver, can I make you your coronets? I said, sure. The strawberry leaves were made by Duke Henrik, who riveted them to the coronet shortly after I stepped down and before I went up to take my ducal title.
Cool. Were you primarily a sword and shield fighter?
I started out being primarily a sword and shield fighter, and certainly on the tournament field, I have been a sword and shield fighter pretty much continuously. In war, as soon as we started actually having wars, I made myself a halberd, and I made myself some good spears, and hook to pole weapons like fish to water. Especially like my 7.5 foot halberd, because the guys with the 9-foot pikes don't believe that you can kill them. They're wrong. I've run out of ramble for the moment.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you were done. I didn't want to redirect. Don, do you have questions?
Is You've had a very long SCA career. What has kept you active? What has kept you interested?
Friends, the fighting. I find that my interest is waning somewhat now that I'm no longer fighting. A decision which was a correct one, but I don't like it. Keep seeing the fighting. I say, I could go back out there. And that would be a bad thing.
It's hard to watch.
But learn to watch. I still have my heraldry. I've always been a herald. I still occasionally have bardic that I do. That's been sort of news took one look at COVID and said, no, I'm out of here. So I'm writing stories instead because I don't have to make the words fit in rhymes and rhythms. I can just put them down on paper in sentences. And I had stories I wanted to tell. But the heraldry, friends, getting old is not for the weak. I don't like setting up camp nearly as much as I didn't mind it before. And tearing down camp is worse.
Yep.
Because you don't have anything to show for it when it's at the end.
Full car that you have to unload when you get home.
Unload about half the car when I get home. The rest of it just stays in the van, a big closed van. So things like the pavilion poles just stay in the bottom of it. And I've been taking to actually camping in the parking lot at some events just to make it easier on myself to break down setups.
So you also are a Laurel. Was that for your bardic? I'm sorry.
Combination of heraldry and bardic.
And
the speakers at my Laurel ceremony were half and half heralds. And all of them were people that I completely admired, and I was their equal. I believed it.
That's wonderful.
The focus of your bardic, is it song or?
Right, mostly songs, occasional just poetry. Mostly songs. A lot of them have themes of darkness and light. And a number of them are relevant to the political situation at the time. When the board, for instance, first put in the non-member surcharge. The first time, I wrote a song which you can find on my website, as a matter of fact. And it was nasty. I did not like the non-member surcharge. I felt it was antithetical to what we are doing. When they put in the non-member surcharge for the second time, and instead of a false fiscal emergency, there really was a fiscal emergency. Well, I set up to pay the non-member surcharge for anyone who wanted to accept my $5. And I wrote a much better song, actually, which is called Welcome Stranger, Welcome Friend. And I sing that on a regular basis because basically it says, welcome. There's a storm outside. Come in. Come in. It's warm. It's bright in here.
And you still do that, right? I mean, you still
Do I have to go out again? We'll give you some armor. We'll give you some supplies. Welcome. And I still say, and I'm not going to sing it on this Zoom.
Okay.
My voice isn't that good, but Zoom will really make
Well, a bunch of your lyrics are on the West Kingdom history site, and I particularly liked the founder song.
I'm also planning on publishing some books on the lyrics. That's the nasty one, yes.
Oh, that's the nasty one? Oh, I mean, it obviously had a point, but I thought it was very, very well thought out.
Oh, I was hot mad when I wrote that. And the first time I sang it, there was 3 beats of dead silence, which, as a bard, let me tell you, that 3 beats of dead silence is the best thing, because it means you hit home. And
Powerful.
well, bard, that's the thing that makes it really good. Yes, continue.
Awesome.
With regard to the heraldry, are you into all the different kinds of heraldry or just voice heraldry?
I do it all. Announcements, town cry, announcing the fields, court heraldry, book heraldry, armory, that is, and names. I'm not as good with names as I am, but I'm good enough. And I'm very, very good at being loud.
The West has a really cool tradition of having banners in the middle of the
I've always been a bit of a do everything. Somebody once came up to me and said, I'd like to do the heraldry, but I'm working on my knighthood. So I'll wait until I'm a knight before I, and my position at the time, which was one of the kingdom staff level heralds, and I said, both? You know, the book heraldry especially, and now he's actually one of the heralds. So he wasn't just shunting me off. He really was interested in heraldry. It just took him, he monofocus. Some people are. Some people go flitting from place to place. I'm more of the latter. So, Coxie, you're looking at questions on the feed, right?
I am. I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask. Someone wants to know if you dated Marion Zimmer Bradley.
I never actually, I mean, I knew her as a fan. I had seen her at conventions, but I didn't really know her that well, no.
Thank you for answering that. I did have another question. The West has a tradition during Crown Tournament where they put all of the banners in a container in the middle of the field. Can you tell us about that, how that started and what it means?
That started, we have to blame Duke Radnor of Gildemar for that. He said, I want more heraldry display, damn it. And so he got Duke Quebec, I think, is the one that made the banner holder, and put it out in the center of the field, and it has holes in it. It's not really a bucket, it has holes in it, which we also use to store marshalling staves. And the idea is that at the end of each round, if you are defeated, you remove the banner and carry it off the field. So the banners are a indication of who's left in the lists, provided the fighters have remembered to take them off the field when they are defeated. And usually the fighter has gone out to fight in roses and win roses by the single batch for his consort or her consort, and has forgotten to go out and get their banner. Usually, just before finals, everybody you get told, get out there and get your banners off the field.
Can you explain to people what the roses is? Because that's a pretty unique Western tradition.
Actually, it's been carried back east recently by a person who came here and said, that's cool. I'm going to go tell my queen about that. What it is, I mean, there are other rose tourneys, okay? The one that I'm talking about is run every crown tourney. And for that matter, most of the coronet tourneys have a similar tournament. Once you're out, and approximately half the people fighting will be out by the end of the second round. More than half by the end of the third round. The queen or the princess has flowers. For the queen, they're always roses. It's a line item in the budget. And she and her ladies sit in the royal pavilion, and fighters go out and say, would you care for 2 out of 3 bouts? They set up, they fight, one of them wins. Or if even a single bout. Guy says, I want to fight as many different fighters as possible, so I'm only doing 1 bout. The victor says to the loser, I want you to take a lady, a rose, to Mistress Lee Radolph-Pagem, who is the list mistress. I want you to give it to her. The loser then has to go to the queen, explain who he fought, and beg a rose of her. Then carry the rose over to the person to whom it is going, and explain why they are giving the rose and who sent it. This is a win-win-win-win situation as far as I'm concerned. Everybody gets to win. The person who receives it, the queen and her ladies get to talk to a fair fraction of the fighters instead of just 1 or 2. The fighters get to fight. The victor gets to do fancy words. The loser gets to do fancy words. There's no downside to this at all.
It's a wonderful tradition. I years ago came down for Brian and Bellatrix's knighting at a Purgatorio, and was sitting there, a visitor, not really knowing anyone, and all of a sudden I started getting all these roses, and it was really awesome. I felt included in the event, and I didn't really know what was going on. I had to figure it out, but it's a great tradition. I love it.
And Sir Antoni Mikhanovic, who was Prince of the Mists with his wonder twin Helga, is the person who said, I'm going to try to take this back and get it started in the East Kingdom. And at least one queen has done so.
Wonderful.
So the West, the West is the only kingdom I know of that doesn't use any list ropes. What's up with that?
We use list ropes.
For crown? You just have this big open field. No?
Yeah, with ropes around it.
Well, yeah, but you don't have, I want to call them Erics, but apparently that's not cool anymore. But you guys, what is the history of having the big open field?
We've always had it. One of the things for a big open field is that if you get a runner, you don't have to call hold as often. You know, if if people are fighting over here in the corner, and there's a guy with a pole arm who's running away from the shield man here, he can run all the way there, come back, and that fight can continue going on. And the fight over there can continue going on. It also gives a lot of room for the roses. Because once you're down to, you've gone from 4 fields to 2 fields, you say, okay, we'll cut it down to the center. You guys, roses, we'll set up the fencing list next to it so that they can fight for roses too. And then the regular tournament takes place over here. He said, gesturing at his window. First time I saw one of those gridded off ones in 4.
Okay.
I still don't understand. I mean, why pen your fight? Our list field tends to be, if we have enough room for it, 100 by 200. Lots of room. In part, we camp around it. So the bigger it is, the more people can actually camp facing right out on the list field, which is a good, in my not so humble opinion.
Yeah, that's definitely
But
different.
we've always done.
It's always been that way.
Okay, when I fought, okay, I don't know what the East does now. When I was fighting back in the East, we had single field tournament field. Is Frontier doing that now? Because they
No.
didn't used to.
We've never, well, as long as I've been playing, I've never seen it done. Not for Crown anyway. I mean, for a Squires tournament, that's definitely one big open field, but that's more of like a mosh pit.
When that changed, because their first Crown list was very definitely a big open field.
Yeah. Well, Misty, when did you start fighting? What year was it? 96, 97?
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
At least that long.
They became a kingdom in 81.
Oh.
That was another fun thing I got to do. I got to sign the scroll where Antir petitioned to become a kingdom. I took a beautiful work of art and turned it into an historical document by scrawling, "Go for it, F Rex," at the bottom.
Nice. That's nice. Did you ever imagine that the SCA would grow into what it has grown into today when, you know, you're playing back in the first couple of years?
Hell no. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea how long it would last. When it hit 10 years, I was confidently expecting that it wouldn't last another 10. It hit 50 years, and that was an awful event. Not in terms of there was lots of things to do or anything like that. It was just the heat on that was awful.
Indiana in the summer is never a good idea.
And they were having a heat wave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. No.
Yeah. No, in part, I'm seeing some things that I'm not as fond of as others, but and depending on what transpires with coronavirus thing. I don't know how it's going to affect continuing large gatherings, because we don't know how it reacts in terms of immunity, or if a vaccine is possible or anything like that. And that has had a immense and negative effect on the SCA.
Yeah.
I mean, meetings like this, having arts demos. I'm going to be giving a class on how to pick your SCA name at our collegium the weekend after next. We are adapting things, but it can't be the same.
No.
This screen is intrusive.
Yeah.
I miss being able
But
to
it's better
reach out
than nothing.
and touch people. I didn't realize what a toucher I was.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine.
So, is there any goals that you still have in the SCA that you haven't achieved? I mean, you know, you're a quad peer and you shaped the Western culture. I wonder.
I can't say. I still want to write. I probably never will. I have been trying to step back, actually, from offices, because I finally got some vague impression that I am actually mortal and that I need to let other people have the fun of working their asses off. I would say no, I don't particularly have any goals left, but let me make a comment on that. I've never particularly had much in the way of goals throughout my life, either in the SCA or out of the SCA. Okay, I had one very early on. I wanted to be a member of the Order Chivalry. And like most goals in the SCA, that's not an end point.
Right.
They put this on you and they say, okay, now get to work. Right?
Right.
Yeah. Now your journey begins.
And when I got my laurel, it was like, okay, now I have to really start writing. So I can't say that I have any goals, but then I never did have very many goals. So it's not that different.
Somebody is asking if you have taken any official students.
I have had exactly one official student. David Zagore was a person in Buffalo who said, please, can I be your squire? And I said, no, because I'm not going to take squires, but you can be my fosterling. And I taught him how to fight. And then I moved away. And, oh shit.
Are we going to lose? Oh, we lost.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh. This has been quite the night of technical difficulties. I apologize.
Do we want to wait and see if we get him back, or do we want to just...
the bard is the one that fell off. I can't sing, Dawn, sing. Let's give him a second and see if he'll come back, and if not, then maybe we'll just sign off for the night. Does anybody have any questions for either one of us while we wait and see if His Grace is gonna be able to get back on?
Now's your chance.
Now's your chance. We're actually asking questions, or willing to entertain them. Oh, it's been quite the night.
Girl, belt it out.
Yes, she wants you to sing.
What am I supposed to sing?
I don't know. No questions for us. We're boring.
Misty, Sir Rifkin, what are your goals in the SCA?
Oh, my goals are so obvious. That's boring.
Share with your fans.
Let's talk about how peerage isn't okay. What artsy projects are you working on now? Right now, oh, his battery ran low. He'll be back on soon. So we will talk about ourselves until His Grace comes back. So right now I am working on embroidering a tunic for my friend Alexandros, who's getting knighted. He was supposed to get knighted at May Crown. Then he was supposed to get knighted at July Coronation, and that was canceled. And now it's September Crown. So that is what I'm working on. And plus I have all this other stuff, but I am really trying to get the embroidery done on that so that it's not hanging over my head. What about you, Dawn?
I am still working on the felt booty project. I took a break to make a hat for His Royal Highness Zipser, and I'm also working on a cloak, a Scythian cloak. That's what I'm working on.
And apparently, because Sir Gabe made me this beautiful baronial coronet because I didn't have anything, I am now going to make him a hoodie. So that is now on my board. Yay! All right, and so somebody else, Fia says, how much do you miss me on a scale of 1 to 10? 10.
57.
Gotta be a 10. Let's see. What's next for Ishaxi?
I'm gonna do these interviews because it's giving me life. I much like His Grace Fleig, am not a goal person. I do what I love, and that sometimes changes spur of the moment.
See, I think, like, for me, like, it's about finding your joy and then finding the joy in the process, but without a goal to work toward, it's like, what's the process? I mean, obviously the process is the joy, but I don't know. I'm goal oriented. I just gotta own it. I own it.
I do make goals. I have, for a long time, I wasn't really able to sew for myself, and I decided that I'm gonna get out of my own way and do that. So I have a list of like masterwork things that I'm doing, and the felt booties are one. I want to do the red leather booties from the Pazarique that have all of the gold.
You said booty.
Booty. So what is our favorite interview so far? That's a really hard answer to question.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I really liked the Attias one because it was our first one, and you know, it was just, it felt really easy. But they've all been good for different reasons, and I know that's sort of a cop-out, but it's true. I've really enjoyed getting to know people, like getting to know Countess E's story. That was amazing, and getting to know all these dukes has been amazing, or getting to know their stories.
Yeah.
So.
And being able to, I think one of the flaws in the SCA as it is now is that we have all of these people who get peerages and become these big personalities in the SCA, and because of this massive reputation that has kind of built up around them, they become more and more unapproachable. And one of the reasons I wanted to do these interviews is to show people that it's just a bunch of human beings out there dressing up in funny clothes and doing things that they love. And most of them want to talk to new people and want to interact. So that's been really neat to be able to do that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Misty.
well, I think the award structure in the SCA is like both the best thing and the worst thing. I think that it artificially makes classes, even though like, you know, the motto that everybody's taught is, you know what, treat your lessers as your equals as your betters, and your betters with the respect that they, whatever, I can't remember exactly. I just think in a lot of ways, oh, he's back. I'm letting him in. Nobody's gonna know what my thought was.
Leave you hanging.
All right.
Yay!
Yay! Are you back? Yay! All
yes,
right.
I think so.
Okay. So
yes, okay. Where were we?
I don't remember.
I asked about had you taken a student? And,
yes.
And you answered.
And so basically, I moved away, and we continued the relationship for some time, as basically he was a remote household member. And then he got to be Principal Herald of the East Kingdom at the same time that I was Principal Herald of the West Kingdom. So I thought it best not to have him be in fealty to me anymore, and had to release him. So he was a student, but he didn't learn the bleep. He didn't learn the thing that I thought I was going to be teaching him, which was how to fight.
But he learned something else equally as awesome.
Never had.
Sorry,
say again.
I said, but he learned something else equally as awesome.
I think so, yes. We're still good friends, by the way. He's dropped completely out of the SCA, but he writes me periodically. And I never took another student, mostly because nobody ever asked me.
See, that was my follow-up question. I was going to say, is there some sort of ideology about not taking student or formal students? Because I'm assuming you've taught lots, just not with a formal relationship.
I went to BART practice for years. I taught all sorts of people how to fight. But my feeling on taking a student was that the student should ask. And nobody ever asked.
Interesting.
I can't say that. Sorry.
No students as a Pelican or a Laurel either? Nobody asked?
No.
Someone's asking if there was one thing that you would bring back or introduce into the SCA, what would it be?
You mean something, is your understanding of that question, this is something that we used to have that I would bring back?
Yeah, that, or something that you'd like to see happen that hasn't happened before too. What changes, I guess, would you make? That's a big question.
That is a big question, and I have periodically, for God Emperor of the SCA, I would, but thank goodness I'm not. I would say the one thing I would like to bring back, which went by the wayside, concept of having a field where you went out and you challenged someone to a fight using big fancy words. You know, now sometimes it would be a ridiculous challenge. I challenge you to fight with me because on your planet the sky is paisley. But you know, I wish to challenge you even just for the honor of our ladies or our consorts. It was a thing that fell by the wayside, I think, in part because it got too silly for a while, and people said, "Oh, it can't be. I can't do one of those challenges because it will just be. It's too silly. I fight serious." We do still have that in our crown tourneys where you salute your consort before each fight, at least in the West.
On tier as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Some of those salutes have gotten ridiculously long, but you know, it's not for me to say what is the proper length for someone's salute to their consort.
I think some of them are a mental ploy.
It's, if I can't, I mean, some people have complained, you know, oh, it's, you know, the guy does the fast salute and he's ready, and this guy is just going on and on and on so that the guy he's fighting isn't ready. Yeah. Well, if the guy he's fighting isn't ready, after that guy finishes his 30-second salute, he wasn't ready 30 seconds ago either. That's my take on it. It's just not, it does not compute that is that easy to disrupt. Probably because it never was that easy for anyone to disrupt me. Maybe just my mental state.
So I have like these 10 questions that I always ask at the end of the ducal interviews. And because you're not fighting anymore, but I want you to pretend like you still are, because some of them have to do with fighting. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
I think some of my best fights have been with Duke Fleig Selkirkson.
Is he in the West?
He's still fighting. No, he's back in the East Kingdom.
Okay. Who would you like to see reign in your kingdom?
And he's still fighting. He was one of the Pensic champions last year.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, question 2. Who would you like to see reign in your kingdom? It doesn't have to be a fighter. It could be a consort.
And it's always okay to say pass.
There's a large number of people. There's a large number of people, but I wouldn't mind seeing Helga and Hans ruling again, with Helga having won it.
That would be awesome. I would love to see that too.
Yep.
All right. If you could talk about fighting with anyone in the world for an hour, who would it be?
As a teacher or a student?
Anybody.
Anybody.
Nestor Corbinarian, he and I are good friends, and we end up talking about fighting anyway. And it's always a good time, and there's always spear.
What is your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
Okay, that was garbled by Zoom.
Okay. What's your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
What is my favorite medievaloid?
Medieval-esque or period movie?
Oh, medieval-esque. Okay. I'd have to say Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
That's a good one. If you could add a rule to the rules of the lists, what would it be?
Rule 0, don't be a dick.
What is your favorite?
Rule 1, see Rule 0. Rule 2, see Rule 0. Okay, sorry.
No problem. What is your favorite tournament format?
I'm really fond of round robin tournaments because they are a lot of fighting for the time. I'm not fond of them for crown tournaments because they are a lot of time, and people always forget that every single fight takes at least 5 minutes. And you start counting up the number of fights, and pretty soon you run out of time. But I like round robins. I like just plain bear pit. Go in there with a bunch of people, fight as many times as you like. Every 3 or 4 fights, walk out, tell the list mistress how many fights you won, how many fights you lost.
I like those too. That's what our Squire's tourney is up here. What's your favorite event?
I'm going to divide that into 2. My favorite West Kingdom event is Beltane. It's New Year's Day. My favorite event as a whole has to go to Penzic. It's just got so much that, well, it takes the entire 2 weeks to do. But there's just so much to do at Penzic, and it's, at least the last couple of years, haven't been bad in terms of weather. When I was fighting, I really loved the pickups, and I kept forgetting just how much I loathed the field battles.
The pickups at Penzic are epic.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
If you could have any helmet, regardless of cost, what kind would it be?
I think the open face bassinet, the same that I actually have. It covers a fair range of period. I don't like the heavy masks in front of my face. And I'm used to it. I know where the glancing surfaces are.
That's important. It's Saturday morning at Estrella, and several people want to talk to you about last night. What did you do? You can pass if you want.
The only possibility that I can think of offhand is that I called some Duke fat ass because he was.
Honesty. All right. What and who was your favorite fight ever?
Oh. That's
a hard one, I know.
Now let me think about
that.
I mean, there have been very many really good fights in my life. I haven't gotten injured often. I've had the opportunity to fight some excellent people and have a lot of fun fighting. I think that I'm going to go with a fight I had very early on. I was fighting Jerome Laird de McKenna, who was not the favorite person of a good many people. And we were having a long fight. He'd taken my leg, which was a strategic error on his part, because I was back under my shield. I only have a 24-inch round, but when I turtle up, I'm a pretty effective turtle, and I can launch from leaning back. So he couldn't inactivate my attack. On the other hand, he was a good fighter. And we would exhaust each other and break for 15 minutes. And ladies would come up to me and tie favors on my arm. In the middle of one of the last bouts of this very long fight, I realized that I was watching a lady across the field walk past while fighting him. That moment of pure awareness of the fight being so complete that I could watch a pretty girl at the same time is the closest I think I will come to Satori, mostly because I don't trifle. I finally killed him. And there were 20 favors on my arm.
Wow.
I said, he wasn't the favorite person of a lot of people.
That's something we don't do a lot of either nowadays, with favors like that. It'd be kind of a cool thing to bring.
Yeah, that's one thing, that would be another thing we could bring back.
Yeah.
Is the ability to fight with another person's favor on your arm in addition to one of your consort.
Well, Your Grace,
It's romantic.
It is.
It is. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking with my sister and I, and sharing all your stories. It was super fun and super informative, and I just really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry that Zoom app is not available for my tablet, and then
It's no problem.
The thing with the battery, it was showing half full battery and it went bloop.
No, I appreciate your persistence.
Yeah,
I probably would have killed my tablet. So
you would have thrown it across the room.
Probably would have. Anyway, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Good night.
Farewell.